Just gonna try to go through. I know one of the things that they're looking to get is remembering that this is for the grandkids to watch at some point. What advice would you give them, thinking of them in a few years, like when they're in like those early teen years? What?
But the best advice I can give them is from personal experience. For so many years, my mother was a mother. And I was so grateful and so happy that she lived and I lived long enough that I could know her as a human being and not old mother.
Mm-hmm.
And we had fun together then. And until that time, I had her restricted. She couldn't do this, she couldn't do that. She had to just do certain things. And when I grew up enough that she could be a human being, be what she is,
Mm-hmm.
or what she was, it was a wonderful experience.
Is this Katie?
Yes.
Okay.
Now that's the story in itself, how she got the name Katie. Her name is not Katie.
Can you tell me?
Her name was Mary Lena. And our oldest child, John, had playmates. I mean, not for real, but actually he named people. And somehow he named my mother Katie. She was his playmate one day. And from that moment on, it stuck. And her other grandchildren from my sister's side called her Grandma. But to my children, our neighbors, she was Katie, and my friends.
That is actually very cool.
Yes.
I have a recollection of my I had like Norman Rockwell grandparents growing up. They were amazing. And as I got a little bit older, I saw how spunky my grandmother was. And I remember sitting at the table with her, and my aunt and uncle are at the heads of the table, and their friends were across, and I was visiting, and my grandmother was sitting next to me. And so under the table, I'd reach over and I'd pinch her leg, but I wouldn't let anyone else see me do it. And she wouldn't say a word. She would just keep going on about her dinner. And then a minute later, she would pinch me back. And I just remember that part of her personality and how much I just appreciated that she had a good sense of humor and that she enjoyed playing these little games. Do you remember, like, are there little stories that you remember, like, with your mom? Like, because like you said, when you saw her as a person, like, what are some of those things you remember doing with her that you appreciate?
Well, we would laugh and giggle over things that would make us laugh. And I really do not know what they are, but one thing I do remember was she wanted to buy her funeral before she died. So I said, fine. So we went there and talked to this lovely, sophisticated-looking lady, and the lady said, "Oh, I know Judy. This is my sister."
Mm-hmm.
And so that's fine. And so I said, "Well, how did you know her?" And she says, "I was married to Buddy." Well, was my sister's boyfriend at that time.
Uh-huh.
And Buddy is a very, like me, he was not sophisticated at all. And it struck my mother and I so funny because this lady was so sophisticated.
Mm-hmm.
And we giggled for days over that. And as I said to the lady, I'm not laughing at Buddy, I'm laughing at myself because Buddy and I are in the same track. And she just was so cool, you know, we just couldn't imagine them being married.
Sure.
So we laughed over that for weeks.
That's awesome. When my dad passed, we did a cremation, and my mom and I went to go pick up the ashes. And clearly it's not a funny time, and we go in, and it's just kind of awkward. And the lady said, she was like, well, Stephen's in the tote, because there was this... All right, we're up and running on this one. So when we were off tape, we started to talk about, as a child, you discovered that you had come down with a case of polio, which is something that none of the kids watching this will have any idea what polio is.
Right.
What? Tell me a little bit about the day that you kind of found out that you had it?
I started downstairs and I fell. And I fell about 3 times before I actually got to the kitchen table where my grandmother was sitting. And she said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "I don't feel good." And she felt my head and I had a temperature. So she went out to wash clothes while I was still eating. And I went out and I fell twice going to the wash house, I think we called it. And so by this time, the neighbor lady knocked on the door and asked if we would take she and her son to the doctor because there was something wrong with him. He had a temperature. And so, of course, we went, and at that time there was a clinic with doctors from Baltimore for polio victims. And when we got there, we had to wait in line. It was very crowded. And the doctor examined me and said that I had polio, and they recommended a cast on my leg because they felt it was just in my one leg.
Now, do you know why a cast would have been beneficial if you had polio?
No, I really, because I never looked into that why, but but I know when it was in their lungs, they were putting an iron, people were putting an iron lung.
Okay.
And so anyway, my mother said no, and the doctor says, well, that's a very stupid answer. He says, there's nothing we can do. So we left and went to the primary care doctor, and he consoled us. My mother was crying, and of course I was crying because she was crying. And so I don't think it was medication, whatever they gave at that time for temperature, or it just sort of bore itself out. But I couldn't walk for a while. But my mother exercised my leg. I had a trike, and I had a dog named Peanut, and he rode somehow on the back of that trike. I do not remember a wagon or anything tied to it. And I would ride around on my trike with the dog on the back for many hours. And then another exercise, my mother sat me on the kitchen table with a bucket, and I had to squeeze it with my toes and lift it. And every day she would add more marbles to it for greater strength. And so finally the temperature left. I don't know how long it was, and I was able to walk. I didn't fall. But the only thing I have, my leg is a teeny bit shorter. Mm-hmm. And I have, when you hit your knee, how your leg jumps, mm-hmm. I do not have
the reflex
in my knee at all. I have it in my ankle, but not in my knee.
Okay.
So that's I was a very light case, and I was very fortunate.
Fantastic. I actually want to say Tom had said something about because when I watch you walk, I would never know that you had any issue with walking. One of your legs is
a tiny bit shorter.
Okay. And so do you do something with your feet? Like, do you get on the ball of one of your feet to kind of, because there's nothing unusual about I think it's referred to as your gait.
Right. No, my leg is very weak. For years and years and years, I always felt it felt different. Mm-hmm. But with old age, I feel different completely all over, so it doesn't matter about the leg.
Okay. And so we talked a little bit about Peanut. I'm curious because your religion seems to be a very large part of your life, especially if you're doing daily.
But that's common. Many people.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's just that I guess almost every year that goes by, it seems like maybe people step away from it a little further and a little further. You find less people with the conviction that you would have.
Oh.
So, a little bit.
No, maybe your age, but no.
That's what I'm saying. So I'm saying people in my generation, like for instance, I don't feel like my generation is going to church as much as your generation was going to church, and.
Well, maybe we needed it more. I mean, there was, we didn't have money, and we didn't have this, we didn't have that. And it's always nicer to put your problems in somebody else's responsibility.
Okay, sure. And so as a child, you grew up as a Protestant.
Yes.
And then you said there was a movie that first kind of intrigued you about Catholicism.
Yes, it was about St. Anne. And this, I don't remember the name of the actress, but I thought, that's great. You can pray to all these saints and get help. Mm-hmm. And I like that idea. Mm-hmm. I needed lots of help.
Okay. And then I think you said that when you were dating or when you married Mr. DePasquale, that's when you officially made the trip.
No, before, because after we started dating, well, I think I told him this when we were dating. I said, if I date a person 3 times, I'm considering marrying them. And so of course, I knew he was Catholic, and I told him I'd probably never be Catholic. But I looked into it, and I really felt it was for me. And I've been very happy with the Catholic religion.
Very
ever
nice.
since.
And then, and we're a little out of order, but we can always edit things in different directions. You had just said something kind of quickly, and I thought it was cute because it kind of shows a fun relationship. Your grandfather called you Tony?
For years he called me Poodle. And then as I got older, he called me Tony because I was always a big deal, he said. And that's what a Tony is. I don't know about that, but that was his definition of a Tony.
Okay.
So, yes.
And so a big deal, like you had kind of a way about you, and he just...
I guess, and I was very concerned with what I wore, what I had on, and things like that. And I was always combing my hair, I guess. Probably what all girls do.
Sure.
But it was good for him.
That's cute. And you talked about, I guess this is when you were in high school in Shepherd with your dad? That's when you started to kind of be in a little bit of a bigger town, so you had friends and you would go to these dances at the...
Yes, and we lived in Martinsburg. I went to school in Shepherd.
Okay.
College, that was at Shepherdstown. And the city had a canteen for teenagers on Friday night and on Saturday night. And then on Sunday night, the Catholic Church had it. And that's when I met the pastor of the church, and Father Lackey, and he was just so warm and so friendly that that's where I really started looking more into the Catholic Church when I was in high school.
Okay.
Because I just couldn't believe that he stayed there the whole time the canteen was open. And he chatted with everyone, was very friendly, and that was certainly good PR for the Catholic Church.
That's very cool. And I had made a quick little note about swimming. We talked a little bit, was there a big public pool?
Yes. Well, there was a big public pool in Martinsburg. Then there was a privately owned larger pool in the outside of the town. It was like a man-made lake or something that you could swim in. And so I went swimming both places, but we roller skated a lot.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about the roller skating.
Well, it was, they would have big rinks inside roller skating. And during the war, I was a child, but there were so many things you had to do without. For instance, elastic. There was nothing elastic.
Okay.
And my underwear had buttons on it. And so one time I was skating and a button came off and my underwear dropped down. And I never went skating after that. That was the end of my skating.
Were you just mortified? Was it?
I was completely mortified. Wouldn't you be?
Yes.
But that was after the war. Elastic came back, so we were okay. It never happened after that.
Can you tell me a little bit, because I'd asked Mr. DePasquale about your generation when the war was on. I remember seeing things in